So many great things that I'm learning from you guys, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
Yeah, that seems like one of the coolest parts about having a podcast is,
Yeah.
it's a way to help out the person who's on there, but kind of getting their message out there. And at the same time, you get to learn from all the people you have on the podcast.
Most definitely. That's what I'm doing. Kat's Kettlebell Dojo, she knows you.
I think we've communicated
Yeah.
online. Yeah.
And she says what I'm doing. I think what everybody's doing with a podcast who's having guests on who really wants to learn is what I'm doing is communal learning. I'm taking that feedback from all of you that I'm having on, and you know what the beautiful thing is? There's always similarities. People have a different way to say it, but in the end, it's the same concept.
Yeah. I think a lot of stuff boils down to the same things because the truth is we're all the same. We're all human. We
Amen.
all have the same needs and often many of the same desires.
And you know what's interesting is that people are often confused because they hear so many things and from different coaches and different angles. And what I wonder what your opinion on this, because I have a list like this, and I don't think we'll be able to get through it because in an hour I have another session. But I try to cram as much as I can into this session with you. And people are always confused, or sometimes beginners mostly are confused. And what I tend to say is if you go to the top of the pyramid, people tend to say the same things. Yes, they may disagree on smaller stuff, but they mostly say the same thing.
Yeah.
What
Which
do
is
you think?
interesting, right? Because as you go along your journey, I think I'm specifically talking about being a coach or a personal trainer because that's my experience. But I think as you go along, that is something that you realize is that when you're first starting, you may have these really strict ideas about like, oh, it's supposed to be like this, or, I think it's like that. And you're trying to figure it out. And then as you go along and grow, I think you also expand yourself a lot. So for me, it was always like, kettlebell sport, kettlebell sport, kettlebell sport. And then as I went along and learned more, I started wanting to branch out beyond just kettlebell sport because, again, those needs and desires are pretty similar across the board, and there's not just one way to do something.
Most definitely. And what you're saying just sparks, and I have to write it down because my brain is such a bad memory storage unit. So you're saying that as we go along and as we grow in not only as a coach but also as trainees, right? Is you tend to think in those patterns like it's black or white, right? There's nothing in between. So that's what I do. And there's one story that comes to mind is I used to hit the gym about let's say like 10 years ago because that's what I started lifting. Man, sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm 37 years of age. I'm like, wow, I'm so old. So 10 years ago, I started lifting. And I remember I went to the gym, and whenever I forgot to take my protein shake with some carbs in it, I forgot it at home, I would rush back home to get the shake. Because I thought if I don't take the shake immediately after my training session, I've wasted it because I've missed the anabolic window of opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking, right? Black and white.
In some ways, it
Wow.
would be nice if it were that black and
Oh,
white, and if
yeah.
the human body did work in a really black and white kind of way. But on the other hand, I think it would be kind of a boring thing to study and try to understand. I think the reason we're so interested in the human body as coaches or as, people who are just training and learning about their body is because it is so individual, it's so unique, and there's so many changes that it goes through in a lifetime, just within one body, and then the variation there is in bodies across the world. I personally find it fascinating.
Powerful. Yeah. And that's what makes us, like you say, you know, as a coach, you know, that we focus on helping people lose weight. The idea, and so like I'm always telling people, the concept is similar: move more, eat less when it comes to weight loss, right? But how we go about it, this is where people differ in ages. This is where it's like, wow, you do this, yeah, it worked for them, but that doesn't mean that it will work for you. But
Yeah.
it all, and you know what I came up with? I came up with the idea that don't confuse the method with the principle, right? So I'm telling folks, I'm like, listen, the principle is move more, eat less, but the method, intermittent fasting, kettlebells, strength training, barbells, dumbbells, eating more fruits and veggies, or going keto, whatever it is, that's the method. But don't confuse it with the principle.
Yeah, and I think don't get stuck on one method, because I think that also goes along with when you're in the beginning of your path, you may think, oh, well, this is the way I've gotten to better health before. I must always do it like that. But your body also changes over time. And so what feels good to your body at one point may not feel so good later, and vice versa. So I think it's important to be flexible with the method that you use.
Amen.
And like you said, the principle remains the same and the method can change. You might want to try a different method because you're bored of the other one. You know, you might want to see if that one works better. You might just feel like one suits your body and your lifestyle better than the other.
Most definitely. So if we could pivot a little bit into kettlebell sport, because that's actually one of the questions that I'm having, is about programming. You're mentioning this idea. So, hey, maybe something works in a certain time period, and then a couple of months later, or for the next prep or whatever, it doesn't work as well. So the basics do remain the same, but how do you go about it, and how do you switch up the programming? So some nuggets for us to digest.
Programming is always a really tough one to answer as a general answer, because you know, it depends. And also my views on it have shifted a lot after, you know, finishing, like, you know, I don't compete at the professional level anymore. And my views on exercise and training in general have changed a lot. So I would say the programming that I've always followed for the most part of my kettlebell career, I followed a programming very similar to what Dennis Vasiliev programs. So that was very similar to what I learned at the Ice Chamber, which is where I started doing kettlebell sport, started doing some coaching. And then when I started training with Dennis and learning from Dennis at his seminars, I was like, yeah, I really like his approach. It's like what I've been doing, but just a little bit more organized and structured. So that's usually what I've used for my students. Now, how I tweak it, it's hard for me to tell you, because there is no rule that I use specifically. It depends on my student. It depends on what they're struggling with. It depends on, you know, what's going on in their life to a certain degree, and how much stress they have, and, you know, what their focus is with their training. So it's hard for me to say specifically how I would tweak the program, because I also believe that while the principles remain the same, I think it's important to get enough time under the bells of your competition weight. And prior to that, it's important to build enough endurance and technical proficiency with the lighter weights. I think how often you train, how intensely you train, all of that can be varied. And especially looking back now, when I look back to what I used to do, and I used to train, you know, do 3 kettlebell sport trainings a week, and it was a lot of volume. And if I'm honest, I don't think I've fully recovered between training. So if I were to go back and program, if I could go back in time and reprogram for myself, I think I would actually do less volume and or only train twice a week. And I think I would have gotten better results. Of course, this is a speculation because I don't know. I can't go back in time. But I don't feel that my body was able to recover from what I was doing. So I think that is incredibly important, that the athlete feels recovered enough from the training to be able to hit the next training and not be in like a recovery debt, because it's better to be underprepared than over prepared, because over prepared just leads to, a disastrous result, say in a competition or whatever goal you're trying to achieve.
Wow. Yeah. The great concept. So it's funny that, no, it's not funny. It's actually enlightening, because Ed Cohn says the same thing. He had a podcast with Dr. Aaron Horschig from Squat University and Dr. Stuart McGill, which I'm very delighted to have him on. Dr. Stuart McGill, the leading spine. Yeah, Dan John made it clear for me. He set it up for me.
Good for you.
That's awesome. Cool. I was like, it's such a cool conversation with Dan. And then he brought up Dr. Stuart McGill so many times, and I wanted to ask him at the end, and he brought him up so many times. I was like, Dan, hey, do you have anything that I could reach out? He's like, I'm going to write him an email as soon as we're done.
That's awesome.
And he introduced me to him. That's awesome. Wow, I can't wait. I have, man, for his podcast, I have so many notes prepared. Probably it's gonna take about maybe 2 hours or something. So
that's really exciting. Congrats.
Really looking forward. Yeah. So, but the concept remains the same, because Ed Cohn said people are lifting too heavy for too long. And one of the things that you said, I mean, you're now reiterating the fact, but this stuck with me. Because the way I train, I don't train for competitions. I train because I love it and I want to get better at it. I want to practice the skill, and of course, I want to build my everything. All the good things the kettlebells do. But I felt like we train four times a week with a programming that allows this kind of volume. But I've realized when I was using the same type of volume for doubles as I was using for singles, I felt like, whoa, my body was telling me like, well, that's a little bit too much. So we stripped it down. It's like we got to cut the volume, because I still love the doubles, but sometimes I feel so crushed. Mm-hmm. And then the next day I'm going into simple and sinister, trying to move the heavyweights, and I feel like, so that's taking the same approach, like, hey, cutting down on volume, right?
And I think it's crucial to listen to those signs and symptoms of your body. Mm-hmm. I'm a perfect example, because I never did, and I completely burned myself out, and in some ways I'm still healing from it today. Wow. And I think when you get to that place where you've been in recovery debt for so long that you eventually reach like a state of overtraining, extreme fatigue, it's not just a simple out, because it took a long time to get in that hole, and then you somehow have to come out, and it requires a lot of time away from training. So, wow. When it comes to listening to your body, it's far better to take a week off if you're really under recovered than it is to keep pushing. And then eventually, you can't train anymore if you want to be healthy. So I think, one of the messages that I really want to get out to people is you do not have to train as much as you think to get the results you want. And that's something I've noticed over the last year and a half of training less, is I don't need to train that much to get a good result, to get better strength, to get muscle tone, to get leaner. It doesn't require as many trainings per week. And I totally understand why people train a lot, because I used to train every day because I loved it. And I still exercise and move in some fashion every day, but the intensity is much lower. And as far as skill-based things go, I've seen a huge jump in letting that recovery happen and taking the time in between. Even though I really want to do it again the next day, I tell myself not to. Yeah, and it feels so much better when you do have that patience, because it really gives your body and your brain time to adapt to the stimulus.
That patience, yeah. Because it's not only the muscles, it's all of that's because I'm reading the book from Dr. Stuart McGill. And one crucial element in the spine is the ligaments. How important those small ligaments between the facet joints and the vertebrae are, and what they do, and if they're getting inflamed and all that kind of stuff. It's like paying attention to the smaller things, understanding. I mean, the neuromuscular aspect. I mean, improving the skill means tuning your motor patterns, being better at it. But if your crushed. You won't be able to store probably as much knowledge or as much skill, or you can't put in as much work as you want to. So that, yeah, it's self-explanatory. But you know what you're saying is, I felt the same. It's kind of like that pressure that you're continuously under. You're like, I gotta move. If I don't jerk this week, next week is gonna be horrible. Or man, I'm in such a good shape right now, leaned out and everything. If I leave those 2 sessions off, I'm gonna gain weight. And the stupid thing is, as a coach and as a person who's in this for so long, you should know better. But the emotional side of things, that pressure, it's like you really got to take a step back and say, nah, stop it. It's all right.
Yeah. And I can say for myself that I've dealt with exercise compulsion and anxiety around those things for many years. Like what you're talking about, getting these voices that are like, well, you're going to gain weight, you're going to lose your progress, you know, you're going to lose your muscle, you need to work out, you know, it's not healthy to relax too much, blah, blah, blah. But it gets to a level, especially if you're a person who's seeking achievement or you have anxiety, it can get to a level that is really not realistic anymore. And, you know, you're not giving your body that recovery time. And those things aren't actually true. And often that's harder to see when it comes to ourselves. But I remember having some students who were training kettlebell sport with me. Hey, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, but I'm so upset because I'm going to lose all my progress, you know, and they would come back and even think that I'm so much weaker now. And I'd be like, you can't lose all that. You've been training for 3 years. You can't lose it in 2 weeks, you know? And I've found that through taking time off, it was like I had to prove it to myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that it's not true. You know, those anxieties that told me these bad things were going to happen, actually not true at all. And in fact, I've found, you know, progress on a lot of skills, sometimes like not touching something for 3 months and doing some other like activation stuff or barely anything, but just, you know, even visualizing or thinking about it, but not doing it. And then 3 months later, whoa, I actually made an improvement. How's that possible? You know, because we have this belief that we have to train all the time to get it. We have to practice all the time to get it. But I think that's more of a mental block. That's what I'm learning. It's more of a mental block than it is a physical block.
Wow. And you know, they say that practice makes perfect. So yes, there is some merit to it, of course. But, you know, I've talked to Dan John about the Olympics. And we were talking back and forth about these coaches, how they prepare the athletes and how the athlete has to perform. I mean, you know this. You got to step up to the plate on day X. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. It's today. Well, I don't feel like it. Well, that's nobody's problem. It's your only problem, right? So you got to be prepared for that day. And he said, you know what? I believe the mental preparation is undervalued and the physiological preparation is overvalued. I'm paraphrasing. So the mental game is much more important. What's your take on this?
I would agree with him. And when it comes to kettlebell sport specifically, that's something that I began to notice at a certain point. I actually have a blog series that I did that kind of started this, but I interviewed different people, like either through online or email, just gathered people's thoughts on what goes through their head in a 10-minute set. And people found this like really fascinating because you kind of wonder that when you're watching a kettlebell sport set, you think, what is going on in their head right now? You know, they're either struggling or they're doing great or somewhere in between. And that spurred me to create some presentations and worksheets on psychology for kettlebell sport because I felt that nobody was talking about it at that time. Nobody was talking about it when kettlebell sport, everybody in the sport knows it's like 95% mental when you're standing on the platform. You've done all the training, but it's really challenging, like you said, to do it on that day at that time and to be struggling in front of people. It's very, very mental. And there's a lot of self-talk, and you can see it when you watch a competition. You can see there's these different things that emerge. Either somebody crumbles some people crumble and they either set the bells down early when, nothing was wrong, or, they drop the bell, or they, their muscles start failing super early, or they struggle through and they like rise to it and they like, push to the finish line, and it's really inspiring to watch. And the difference between that is all psychological, because both of those people have trained. And then one might have more practice than the other at a competition. But I really think the main thing is psychological. It's what's the self-talk inside? Is the self-talk negative? And if you're going around your daily life with negative self-talk, you can bet it's going to be heightened when you're standing on a platform. So I've done presentations at multiple seminars where I talked about the psychology of kettlebell sport in different aspects of considering try to identify your internal talk. Is it negative? Is it positive? What things work? What things don't? And giving different exercises for how you can prepare mentally for a 10-minute set.
Wow.
So I would completely agree. And I think even I would go so far as to say, not just competitions, even just in achieving a physical goal that you have, that it's important to mentally believe that you can do it. And that's something I've been appointed to recently, is I have certain mental patterns where I think that I can't do something, even though I easily have the strength, but just there's something inside that's like a self-defeating voice, and trying to work with that voice and perhaps counter it with other things or visualize that you can do it. I think that could be a very powerful tool. I'm seeing now more than ever, it's a very powerful tool.
Wow. It's so many good things that, the psychological aspect may be one thing that could happen from the get-go, because that's what we see when we coach people when it comes to weight loss. And, people have been struggling with it for years, and then there's certain barriers in their head. I think maybe one of the good anchor points would be recognizing it, right? So, hey, those voices, those demons, they'll come up. Don't be surprised. If they catch you by surprise, you lose. Even if you're a robot or a tank in training or whatever, you gotta anticipate, right? Because I have one client now, he's preparing for a certain fitness test. And so we're using all types of training methods to prepare him. And then we had recently a conversation about the test itself. And we went through it meticulously. And I told him, listen, when you go to that test, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have a worksheet. When you will get up, what you will eat, what you will do. And you'll have that order, that structure that gives you a certain sense of security, even if things don't pan out the way you want them to. And anticipate it. So like, these push-ups, they're probably failing me now, but let's not lose hope for the squats. Just keep pushing as far as I can, but the next one, I'm still there. So the mental game. And even now, as a business owner in today's day and age, in the fitness industry, I walk around with the idea of, hey, I do this to serve people. So there will always be a way. Yeah. I'm educating myself. I'm in it. I live it. I love it. I breathe it, and I'm here to serve. So I'm going to survive. I just got to be careful, even with the spending and everything, but I will survive. So that's my mentality. I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Mentally, it's really important, and it can be challenging to look at those demons, like you call them, that you have in there, because they often are symptomatic of different things we carry inside our minds, but in our bodies, we carry that in our bodies. And I think a lot of people who are overweight or obese, I think there can be often, traumas or psychological things. All of us have it. And being obese is only one expression. Others of us have it through exercise compulsion or different things that come up. And I think the true strength inside of us is not physical. It's the strength to honestly look at those demons and to face them and to be honest with yourself, because it's really easy to be in denial about them, and work through them and just be like, hey, this is where I'm at. It's everybody has them, and it's very vulnerable to talk about for most of us. But I think the true strength comes from being able to face those things, because if you can accept yourself and love yourself even with those demons, that's how you move forward in a healthier way. And I think if you're healthy internally, it expresses itself outwardly.
And recognizing you're not the only one, right? Recognizing that, because that's what happens, right? When you fall into a cave like this, or when the demons take over, it's like, I'm probably the only one. Everybody else lives the perfect life, right? Or nobody has to battle these demons. So that's like, and I think that's one of the concepts of self-love or self-empathy from Dr. Christian Neff, I think her name is. And she said, one of the most important things to build self-confidence and self-love is recognize you're not alone.
Yes.
That's
I could say that's really powerful. I've been recently sharing with my mailing list kind of my journey of kettlebell sport and overtraining myself and exercise compulsion, just like my journey, and just putting it out there. And it's been important for me to heal. It's actually been very powerful to hear other people's stories. And it's like you said, it's hearing that I'm not alone. There's other people that have experienced very similar things. And that is a very powerful part of healing and accepting, I think, is also to realize, okay, I'm really not the only one. There's lots of other people who have struggled and gone through similar things.
Humans can relate. And that's, I think that's a powerful concept. Even if you don't go through it. I mean, we have people who are struggling with obesity, and they have lost 20 to 30 pounds. And so I don't have the same experience that they have, but I'm trying my best to understand the vulnerability, because in some areas of my life I have it as well. And so that builds a lot of empathy. And I think when people realize, and we have many coaches and trainers who are following the channel and what I do right now, is realizing that if people feel that you're honestly empathy, then I think that's one of the best selling points of a good coach, is just empathize with people, not judging them. And being there, and with people, I think in sport or in athletics, it's the same. We have people who come in and they crush it sometimes, and sometimes they completely failed. And so when they fail, I'm like, hey, who cares? We found out this strategy doesn't work, or maybe you had a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. Doesn't take nothing away from your progress. In fact, it's even helpful. Because the ups and downs, they will actually teach you, wow, life is not black and white like you mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah. Every failure and mistake is an opportunity to learn if you choose to see it that way.
And it's, it sounds so corny. It sounds so corny, but it's the truth. It's reality. Wow.
Yep.
Most def. If we could pivot a little bit, because I have a question. You mentioned 3 things, actually. All right. You talked about your experience with Dennis, that your views have changed on training, or just that your views have changed on certain aspects. So if you could give me a real life example of programming, or how you would work with a client, if you have an example maybe in mind, that's what I would like have or get your thoughts on. And the second thing is, where have your views changed and how?
When I program for somebody, most of the people that I've worked with that I write specific programs for, that I have over the years, have been for Kettlebell Sport specifically. So they're going to have usually 3 trainings a week. One would be an interval training, one would be a repetition training, one would be a longer set training. Now, that may vary depending on where the person is in their kettlebell training. So if they're very new, there might be 2 days of sets, and 1 day would just be a technique practice. So that would be how I would generally program for kettlebell sport specifically. I have a few other clients who are working with me just for general fitness, and
Mm-hmm.
can't say I don't have a outline for it. I have them do some, warm ups and mobility exercises, and
Mm-hmm.
then we work on different strength exercises. Usually it's with kettlebells and body weight,
Mm-hmm.
and we do a lot of tempo stuff to help build that foundational strength. I would say my views have changed in that I no longer program nearly as intensive trainings as I used to. And I think it's really less about, for me at this point, coaching is less about writing like this, again, kind of goes back to that black white thing. It's less about having a specific program. It's more about the understanding what the person needs, how, like, what they want,
Mm.
how they want to feel. So for people who aren't training for kettlebell sport or a specific goal, I just want them to feel good. I want them to, work on something that they enjoy. I want them to
Mm.
build some strength and just keep themselves healthy. So
Mm.
what that looks like depends on the person's interests, what they're interested in doing. I have a client who is a mom, and she really likes doing handstands, and so we do some handstand training. But it's not
Mm.
because she wants to go to the circus, but because she loves doing the training, and
Mm.
so she
Mm.
works on that as part of her plan. But there might be somebody else who has no interest in handstands, so we don't do handstands. We just do kettlebells and body weight stuff.
Mm. It's interesting. And how would you compare kettlebell sport and hardstyle? How would you, in a sense of, because kettlebell dojo is where I do agree to a certain extent, and to a certain extent maybe that's just the coach in me who just loves it, or just loves teaching complex things or breaking it down into its detail. So kettlebell sport is more complex, therefore hardstyle is more minimalist, therefore hardstyle is better to teach maybe, or more optimal for most people. What's your take on this? Do you agree, disagree, or kind of share that opinion?
I wouldn't say I teach hardstyle anyway. I've taken a strong first cert, but I don't, like we've talked about this before. I
Yeah,
don't really teach hardstyle. It's kind of a mix. So
a
I think
hybrid.
most people
Mm-hmm.
should learn how to do basic strength training with kettlebells. Could you do it with dumbbell or a barbell? Sure.
Most
But I
likely.
think most people who come to me are interested in kettlebells, and kettlebells are popular these days. They're portable. You don't need a lot of space. So I think that the basics are what's most important. So I think what's most important to teach people is the basic things that are going to strengthen their body and that are going to help them feel their body and get more in tune with their body. Because I think what somebody really wants is to feel more connected to their body and to feel like they're doing something that's good for their health and they're
Mm-hmm.
building some strength. If we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about general health,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who just wants to get fitter. So I think it's, to me, it's less about what specific exercises must I cover, more like, hey, let's give this person a foundation. Let's
Yeah.
help them feel their body,
Yeah.
start to get in tune with their body. Often
Mm-hmm.
I just go back to basics. They're going to deadlift, they're going to squat, they're going to do
Most
some
definitely.
push-ups, they're going to,
Mm-hmm.
do what split squats. They're going to do just basic stuff to build strength.
Awesome. That's why
I mean,
that's why I'm pushing this idea of the hybrid style. We talked about it the last time, and I had Steve Cotter on in the meantime, my sensei and my mentor. And I told him, I said, Steve, I believe you are one of the original hybrids, because you learned Pavel Tsatsoulin's idea of kettlebell training, which is hardstyle, which is suited for general fitness. Yeah, it's more easy. You do deadlifts and overhead squats or windmills, Turkish. You don't do that in kettlebell sport. Yeah, I got it. But then you went to Russia and you saw what the Russians do. You took it back, so now you started mixing. And I think that's the beauty of it. When I sometimes talk to people, I'm like, and I talked to Kettlebell Dojo about it. I said, You know, a hard style swing is different from the kettlebell sport swing. We understand, yes. But a hybrid version is something that's kind of like in between. Because hard style means you favor heavy weights, and kettlebell sport means you work as efficient as possible with your energy capacity, right? So there's something in between. And when you combine it, that's what I love. And I love the Turkish get up. I love the hard style swing. I'm swinging the 48. I got a 40 kilo Turkish get up recently with my right side, with my stronger side. I love that stuff. But I still a kettlebell sport snatch. We recently, what was that? I took a 20 and we went with a speed for 2 minutes, but I went with a 27 RPM with a 20 kilo. So we were busting it out. And I love it. I love the idea of it. And I told Kat, and that's what I told Luca as well. When you do a hard style clean, it feels completely different. I'm not saying that the sport idea is better, but I believe you connect with the bells more, right? It's more subtle. So that's why I like to combine the two. And it is applicable to general fitness. What you're saying, using the basics. That's what we do as well. Powerful stuff. You know, another question that I have is, if somebody has lower back problems, okay, which many people have. Let's say somebody even has had a herniated disc in the lower part of the spine. Would you still advocate, or would you still work with those people, for example, learning how to rack in the kettlebell sport fashion, jerking in the kettlebell sport fashion, cleaning in the kettlebell sport fashion with singles and doubles? How would your approach be?
I think that my approach would be based in focusing on mobility and body weight and trying to help them get more in tune with their body and reduce pain before adding load. Particularly, I don't think I would encourage somebody to do overhead lifting or the rack position if they have a lot of low back pain, because my goal as a coach is I want someone to feel better when they leave than when they came in, and I don't want to risk them feeling worse. Now, I also, one of the things that's changed a lot for me is I don't see huge value in a lot of overhead lifts for people, for most people. Most people do not have the mobility to go up here.
Most definitely.
So I think, even snatching, jerking, that kind of stuff, if somebody has the mobility, cool. But if they don't, and especially if they have low back pain, they may exacerbate it, because if they don't have mobility, it's going to come from their back.
Yeah.
So for that person, I would start by taking a look at how does their body move when we go through different drills? Where do they feel pain? How are they able to move their pelvis well? Do they have, mobility in their upper spine? What else is going on in their body? And try to help them feel better and see if we can strengthen some areas that might reduce that low back pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's that concept that we also follow that I've learned from functional movement systems. It's move well before moving often, and then I added under load. I like this from Gray Cook. So if you're immobilized, and that's what we see so many times. I think we talked about it the last time. It's extension. And what I started doing with folks is don't even pick up weights. Just stretch your arms.
Yeah, you need to be able to get into, a shoulder flexion here without using your, compensating with your back. Otherwise, you can do it. So this is something I have been thinking about, is a lot of people in kettlebell sport or who do kettlebell training, they're either in denial that they don't have the mobility, or they don't know, like they think they can get there because they can get their arm there, but they're actually compensating elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or they know that they don't have it and they do it anyway. Now, I can't say what is the level of damage that might cause to your joints. All I know is that it's going to be harder on your body than it would be if you had the right mobility, because you are going to overload something else
Yeah.
above or below. You know, your neck is going to get
Yeah.
stiff or your back's going to hurt, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's not like doing overhead lifting is the end all be all. You don't need to do it to be healthy. You know, if you wanted to compete kettlebell sport, now that would be an issue, but that's something you got to be realistic with
Yeah.
yourself about. Should I do that? Is that good for me? And if it's not good for me, am I willing to sacrifice whatever, you know, whatever will come of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
to do the sport?
Yeah.
And
Dan,
that's something
yeah.
that I think people should consider before doing a sport, particularly before pursuing it at a higher level, whether it's in training or in competition, is the cost worth the reward?
That's it's exactly this risk to benefit ratio Dan calls it. See, these same concepts coming in different sentences and different descriptions, but it's the same thing. And you mentioned that with the mobility aspect. We recently had a seminar with our local law enforcement school, which was really cool. And there's one guy. He's a high level, not only a high level athlete, but he's also very strong with the weapons. We're doing some cool stuff now with tactical and kettlebells. It's an awesome project that I'm engaging in with him. And he has incredible, a great kinesthetic sense. He's very strong. He used to compete in the CrossFit Games in Switzerland. He's from a very well-known part of the CrossFit region here in Switzerland. And there's something I saw when we were looking at the goblet squat, which is basically a front squat, right? So I was looking at it, and it was so interesting to me that he wasn't able to go down into a deep squat. It just wasn't possible. So his hips, he always did kind of like a back squat, right? Shifting your hips back, upper body moves horizontal into the horizontal plane, and he's leaning forward, which is nice if you have the weight on your back, but not if you have the weight in front of you. So we talked about it, and then I was like, maybe your hips are not built for this. So after the session, he comes to me and he's like, that was a huge part of revelation. I said, why? He said, well, I always hated the front squat, but I was forced to do it. And I felt crunching in my hips. It used to hurt. I felt tight. And now with that revelation, I'm like, maybe it's not built for me. Then I showed him an article from the PTDC, from Jonathan Goodman, where depending on the way your pelvis is built and depending on the acetabulum, the hip socket, the everything, the legs, how it's in the socket, how the hips are formed, how the pelvis is formed, this will determine how you will squat. Yeah. So if you're not able to engage in a proper front squat with an upper body like this, like the Chinese do it, leave it be. No mobility will help you. Your body's not made for it.
So, yeah, right? I think that definitely can be true. And I want to say that oftentimes it can be due to mobility restrictions. And I'm saying that from personal experience because I always hated front squats. And it wasn't until I started doing more focused mobility work that I realized a big part of it was my ankles and my hips and building, more strength in my shins, building strength in like my lower abdomen and different things that I think it's more possible to change our mobility than we think. I think that many people either don't put in the time or they don't know how. And I think that most people don't. I remember this from the FRC certification I took, functional range conditioning, which is the mobility certification I took. They talked about many people never reach the potential for their mobility because they don't know how to train the strength of it. They try to stretch, but they don't strengthen the range, and so they never actually reach their potential. And so I think you could be totally right if someone's pelvis isn't made for a certain position, that could be limiting them. And I think there's often many changes that can happen to help make it more possible. You may not look like you're saying, like one of the Chinese weightlifters and just be sitting totally upright, but it may be possible to get more comfortable in the position and make it more possible.
You're most definitely right. I'm just saying, there was a push maybe a few years ago where everything was all about, at least in our region, where everything was all about mobility, where to a certain aspect, I was like, hey man, a coach is not a physiotherapist. I do think, or that's my opinion, I do think we need some basic understanding, but if people are really messed up in certain areas, I rather refer out, because we have an awesome physiotherapist around here locally who understands certain aspects that I don't understand or don't even want to invest time into, because I don't want to broaden my spectrum too much. I want to stay close to what I know, right? So there was that push against, like, you cannot outstretch everything. So it's like, maybe you're not made for it. And so I think there's a great lesson to learn that, yes, it may be some mobility aspect, especially in the ankles. That's why people are lifting with the weightlifting shoes, right? Or have a wedge under their feet that their body stays upright and stuff. And at the same time, I'm like, man, listen, just do back squats and you're done. It's a quicker way to still be able to squat. And while I do realize that maybe, yes, we can engage into some mobility work in that area, in that session, it was like so quick, so many people, I'm like, leave it be. Put the bell on the neck, go into back squats. And he felt awesome afterwards. So that's, yeah.
Well, I agree. I think it's good to be realistic also about your capabilities. And if there's an exercise that does not work for you, like you said, don't do it. There's plenty of other ways, to train your legs. You don't have to do a front squat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that we're also stuck in sometimes. It's like, you gotta do it because it's a great exercise. It is a great exercise, but maybe it's not perfectly made for you, depending on your anthropometry. I mean, the best squatters in the world have a certain build. So if you're very tall with long legs, you'll probably never be a very strong power lifter to a certain degree, right? So understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and then just, forgetting the weakness and just pounding on your strength, right? So, hey, that's what I'm good at, so let's focus on it. Good stuff.
So long as the weakness doesn't get too out of balance. It's like, it's moderation with both, because I think if you ignore it too much, then that could be most injury comes from imbalance, right? The bigger an imbalance. So I think it's good to work on the weaknesses, but maybe the way you work on them is different than you think. Maybe it's working on the ability to get into a position rather than trying to, lift a bunch of weight there or.
Yeah, most definitely. That's why I love, it all comes down to nuances. It's such a nuanced conversation. When I talk to folks who are at an elite level, I always see the nuance. It's like, yes, a little bit of this, but it may be a little bit of that, right? So it's not, like you said, right? Yeah, it depends, which is I think one of the greatest phrases that you can utter in the fitness industry. It's like, it depends on many factors, actually. So yeah, I really enjoy this. So I have a client coming up, but wow, I really dig this. And just as a roundup at the end, I'm setting up this round table, right, that I've sent you an email.
Yeah.
So let me tell you who already said who's going to be on. We'll have to find a date, of course, and I don't know how we're going to. Somehow we got to do it, but let me see. We got Steve Cotter, Luca Corchia from Canada, Cat's Kettlebell Dojo, you, me, and Chandler Marchman.
Cool. Well, that'll be a nice challenge to try to figure out the time zones.
I think
we got like Europe isn't Cat in New Zealand or something.
Yeah,
then
most definitely.
People are in California.
Yeah. When I talked to Cat's Kettlebell Dojo, she's in New Zealand. So my time was 10 a.m. in the morning. Hers was 8 p.m.
Wow.
But she said, listen, I get up at night if I have to. I want to be a part of this. So it's awesome. And I think when I'm sending out the doodle, I think one thing that maybe everybody can agree on is maybe a Saturday or a Sunday where mostly everybody's free. And then we can maybe juggle the time. Somebody, hey, listen, I don't care if Sunday in the morning or in the evening. So we're going to set this up. And on a final note, I'm just asking, I'm putting together this course. I'm calling it the hybrid style masterclass, where I'm combining, and just as a maybe small side note to you as a coach, the course system, online course system, just as a thought for you, we have just recently sold over 100 courses, over 100 online kettlebell workout courses, priced at $97 each.
Awesome.
So I'm telling this everybody that I know, because I think professionals need to upgrade their game in the online world. So there's a huge market. And maybe if you want to think about it, if you love teaching and pivoting a little bit into the online world and and selling online courses, there is a huge market. And we're setting up a pre-sale list right now. I just sold 4 courses yesterday because I'm incorporating some marketing tactics which are working out great.
Cool.
And now I'm working on this hybrid style masterclass. So there's something that you mentioned where I just want to ask you, and you can of course tell me whatever you want to charge for it, but this psychology on kettlebell sport that you mentioned, and you said you had some seminars. Mm-hmm. Do you have some footage or some written blog post about it, or stuff that
I don't have any footage. I have presentations and
awesome
worksheets that I've created.
Awesome. Because I would be highly interested in having you do a segment, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, on this idea of the psychology of kettlebell sport. And you could tell me what you would charge for it, I would pay for it, and then I would include it in the masterclass. If that's something that you're interested in, you just let me know.
I think 5 to 10 minutes would be hard. It probably would be more like 20 to 30 minutes. I feel like 30 minutes would probably be more ideal, but.
Which is awesome. What we could even do is just segment it into, let's say, like 3 to 4 sessions. Part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Because people have a very short attention span, and when you offer online lessons, a beautiful time limit would be 4 to 8 minutes. And if it's longer, it's a little bit tricky. So if we could cut it down into, let's say, 4 segments or something like this, I'd be highly interested in that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm curious, what are you using to create your online course?
Thinkific. I'm sending you.
Okay.
Sending you the link. Check this out. Thinkific.com. That's what I'm using. And let me tell you, the possibilities are endless. And there's not a lot of great stuff around, especially in the online course world. I'm talking about the one-on-one coaching. Of course, we have all the legends still active with Strong First, IKFF, everybody. But online courses that people can buy, and then they have Thinkific is an online system, an e-learning platform, and then you can just walk through it like it's like a course, like in school, with videos, text, slides, and presentations, everything. It's an awesome platform.
Yeah, I've looked at it before at Thinkific, and there's another one. I forget what it is, but I'm wondering if people are using that to create fitness programs, or if they're mostly using it to do like video courses. Well,
I'm actually using it for both, and it works out.
Yeah.
It's like I put my finger into a hornet's nest.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me tell you, there's massive potential. Massive.
Yeah. Well,
so
thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
You're welcome. I'm telling this to everybody because professionals, we need folks like you in the game, and we need folks, professionals to maybe upgrade their online game to combat all that stuff that's out there, to a certain degree. And see, that's how professionals teach.
The world of kettlebells is dominated by two training styles called hardstyle and kettlebell sport. Although vastly different in nature, they have been proven to work and give you the most bang for your buck whenever you pick up a kettlebell, if you apply the technique correctly and are able to differentiate between the two. Now, for beginners, this task might be understandably confusing. With our upcoming hybrid style masterclass, in 100 lessons, you will embrace the emergence of the hybrid style movement, where you will learn how to combine the best of both worlds and become a master at handling the kettlebell. Join the next revolution in kettlebell training now and sign up for our early birds list to stay up to date and receive an exclusive discount on release week. Link is in the description.